This video will explore all of the SubD buttons. My belief is just as Grasshopper parametric modeling changed the way buildings look, SubD will change the way we generate architectural forms. Gone are the days of 2D to 3D workflows. 2D drawing is dead. If you want to create captivating three-dimensional forms, then you're in the right place. Let's jump into it. I mentioned that we're going to look at all the SubD tools. So you see I'm here in the SubD tools tab, and we have a big long panel with a whole bunch of buttons, and we're going to look at each one of them. We also have a vertical toolbar, and we're going to look at the top half of these buttons. All right, what are we looking at here? Well, I took inspiration from Snøhetta's project, the Center for World Culture, and it was the forms were, the theory was behind it that they're going to look at stones and the way the stones press against each other and hold each other up. This is a great project for using SubD tools. As I mentioned, the 2D to 3D workflow is dead. Let's jump into it. All right, we're just going to model these buildings here that you see, but what else are we going to model? Let's back out of this for a little bit, and I'll type in show to show the rest of my geometry. So besides the Snøhetta buildings, we'll look at creating all these amazing objects here using all the SubD tools. All right, let's get to the Snøhetta project. So I'm going to isolate these. So to model the Snøhetta project, I'm starting with a bunch of SubD boxes, and I can go ahead and make my first one. Where's the SubD box? It's right here in the menu, and I'm going to go ahead and use my grid to snap to. So I'm going to go ahead and create this object. I'm going to make it about that big and about that tall. Okay, so you see it's very different than this one. So let's make it more like this one. So I'm going to go ahead and edit what is called the subgeometry. If I hold my shift and control key down, I can select edges, faces, and if I make a window here, I can select vertices. So that's holding my shift control down. Well, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to stretch this edge. So I'm going to hold shift control, and I'm going to use the gumball. So we're using the gumball, and I'm going to use the gumball. I'm going to turn my snap off, my grid snap off. So I'll be toggling my grid snap on and off. So I'm kind of making it like this long pointed up object at the top. Okay, so we can kind of see that now. It's kind of looking more like this stone object. And I'm going to add a crease down the middle, but before I do that, I need an edge there. So I'm going to use the subdivide, the SubD, to add more faces to it. So you can see this happening here. So you see how we get that. And I'm going to take this edge, I'm going to hold shift control, and I'm going to double click, and it's going to give me the entire ring of that edge, and I'm going to add a crease. So add a crease is right here, and I can add a soft crease or a hard crease. I'm going to add a hard crease by right clicking on it, and there I get my hard crease around it. All right, so I'm going to keep doing this for a bunch of these to finally get this object here. It looks like I need to probably scale this up a bit. But one thing we'll do to the bottom of all these is we're going to flatten these out. And the way we're going to do that is I'm going to hold shift control and delete these bottom faces. And then you see I'm left with an opening at the bottom. I need to delete the back faces too. And then we're going to use a process. So I just want to model one of these in real time and slow time and talk about it like I'm doing now, and then I'll just model the rest in fast time. All right, so let's look at the front of this, and I'm going to select just the points, and to select just the points I'm going to use this selection filter in the upper right, selection filter vertices. So when I make my window, it's only selecting those vertices, and I'm going to use the set point command, set PT. Love this command, great command, set PT, and I'm only setting them in the Y direction, and I'm going to say align to C plane. I'm going to type OK, and I'm going to type in 0 for the Z height, 0, enter, and that brings them down to the bottom. So you can see that that stone is now brought its way down to the bottom. I'm going to flare out the bottom though. I'm going to hold shift and control. I'm going to select the bottom edges here. So I need to take off the vertices filter by clicking on the circle with the line through it. And then I'm going to hold shift and control and select the whole bottom of this. Let's make sure I get the whole bottom. Just missing one here. All right. And I'm going to scale these out with the gumball and just kind of stretch those out a little bit just to get that bottom to taper out. All right. So as I mentioned, I'm going to model the rest of the shapes in fast mode, and then we'll come back and stay tuned. We're going to go through all of these SubD tools, and it's going to be really exciting, I promise you. All right. See you in a little bit. All right, I'm back. So that was a lot of fun making that. Hopefully you picked up on what I was doing. Those were all just made from SubD boxes. So we'll get a better sense of it as I go through the individual objects. So let me just, I'll move these over. And let's show all of our objects. Okay, so we're going to start with these two objects here. So I'm just doing a lot of isolate and a lot of ZS for zoom scale. Okay, let's jump into these buttons. All right, we'll click the first one, create a SubD face, and I'm going to go ahead and do that by clicking 4 points. Okay, I made that. Right click out of it, and then I'm going to go ahead and make a second one. Just picking my points. And if I press and release the tab key, you see the quad versions of it. I'm going to bridge between it. And one way I can do that is use this bridge meshes or SubDs. And I'm going to pick the edge that I want to bridge, the first edge, enter, the second edge, enter, and it bridges between it. And then I can tell it the number of segments for the bridging. I can tell it to join. I can tell it to put a crease in it. We'll get into this a little bit more with some other objects, and you can really see the difference between it. I'm just going to use one segment right now and click OK. And now I can use Shift Control and I can pick this face and I can raise it up, and you see the other geometry raises with it. And I press and release the tab key and I have the smooth version of it. Alright, so that was the first button. Alright, create a single SubD face. Second button, create a SubD plane. Very similar, just different in the way that you create it. So I can go ahead and click a couple points and it makes a plane. Click up a couple points and it makes a plane. Click a couple points and it makes a plane. Press and release the tab key, we see those unsmooth versions. All right, let's keep on going through the list. We did the first, we did the second. The third is to create a SubD box, which you saw me creating a whole bunch of SubD boxes in the beginning of the tutorial in this fast mode, looking at the Snøhetta project. Okay, so we have this box. We can do things to it. We can select the top face. We can pull it up. We could delete the top face if we wanted to, and you see that going away. We could scale in some of the faces, so I'm just going to select it. And so a lot of use of the gumball. I'm going to take my grid snap off so I can scale that in. Now, what you see right now is it's controlling a whole lot of the form. So that's when I went in and used the subdivision, the subdivide SubD, and then I get more faces to work with. So it's kind of just finding the right balance between more or less faces. And then I can scale that out a little bit. You can see that. All right, so that's the box and how we manipulate it. Let's keep looking at all the buttons. So that's the box. The next one is the sphere. So I'm just going to go ahead and create a sphere. All right, so what are some things that we can do with the sphere? So kind of looking at all these buttons one by one, but also looking at what we can do to each object. How can we manipulate it? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete these front faces here. But before I do that, I'm going to create what's called a mirror reflection. So that's this tool here. and I'm going to apply it to this one. Start of reflection plane. So I'm going to use my grid snap, and I'm just going to pick a point here, and you see it creates this cool section, and then I hit enter, and then it flips it over. Now these are reflections of one another. I'm going to move this in a little bit closer here. So you see they're moving together. I love the way they collide into one another. So they're moving together. So it's a mirror object. So whatever I do to one happens to the other. So for instance, if I hold Shift Control and I delete these faces, delete those faces, they're both deleted. Okay, so they're mirror objects, which is super, super helpful. All right, now let's create a bridge between these two. So I'm going to click on the bridge tool and select my first edges or faces to bridge, and I'm going to double click and get that ring. Enter, select my second set. I'm going to double click and get this ring, and then I'm going to bridge between it. And then we looked at this in the beginning. I can add multiple segments. I can increase or decrease the straightness of the bridge between it. Let's see, if I add less faces, it's a little more smooth. All right, so that's bridging between the two. All right, so now the reflection stays. So again, if I move or scale, let's say I kind of edit these and I bring this in, it's happening on both sides. Okay, now to remove the reflection, you're just going to right click on the same button, pick these and remove it. Now when it was in symmetric mode, it always makes one side a light gray and another side a dark gray. That's how you know it's in symmetry mode. So I'm going to take it out of symmetry mode. And now we'll see that I can edit these a little bit non-uniform. Okay, so now we have a little bit of a non-symmetrical object. All right, let's keep going. That was the sphere. The next one is an ellipsoid. So let's make an ellipsoid. Ellipsoids are really cool. So you make the first axis, and then you make the second axis, and then you make the shape of it. So you get these really cool forms with the ellipsoid. All right, there's our ellipsoid. Nice shape. You can see it's a good starting point. You can do a lot with this one. Next, the SubD cone. Let's take a look at that. Okay, so I'm going to make this SubD cone here. We're going to do something a little more architectural. So that's the SubD cone, and the one next to it is a truncated cone. So very similar. Except this one, the top can be truncated. It doesn't come to a point. So we can make some columns with these. Let's turn off the grid snap. So I'm going to delete the faces that are on the top of these. Okay, so I'm going to hold Shift Control. I'm going to start by getting these top faces here. And I'm going to delete those. So basically I have a truncated cone. And let's delete the other one. So just a little bit different in the way that they look. But both of these can be columns. So I'm going to flare out the tops of these. So I'm going to hold Shift Control and I'm going to double click on the top ring and get that top ring, and then I'm going to scale it out. Okay, so I'm just using the scale tools. This one's left to right. This one right now is up, down, and then if I hold my Shift key, they'll scale together. And I'm going to flare this out. So you get this really kind of nice, like column form. And I'm going to do the same thing to the bottom. Let's isolate this. Let's get rid of these bottom faces. So I can probably do this better in like a front view and just hold my Shift and Control key and just pick all these bottom faces. Okay, so now you're getting something more column-like, but we're going to make this much more slender. So shift control, let's get all these bottom ones. Make sure I get all the bottom ones. Come on, all the bottom ones. And I'm going to scale those inward. Just kind of get this really, so you get this really nice like sculptural column. So you get something kind of really architectural. And the same can be done. Same can be done with this one as well. This one I like because it's already tapered. So we can have our tapered column. Let's get rid of the bottom here. So we got just kind of like a nice standard tapered column. All right, what's the next button? So those were our two cones. The next button is just a cylinder. And so I haven't really pointed out, but every time you use one of these SubD tools, you have a menu. Okay, you have a menu to select from, and sometimes it's the number of faces, the number of sides. So just something to keep an eye on. So I'm going to go ahead and make this. Let's just kind of make this. Let's get the grid snap on. So just a cylinder. Again, it's another way you can make an architectural column or make a form. For this one, let's look again at the hard crease. I really like this hard crease. So I can hold Shift and Control, double click, and it gives me the whole ring. And then I can right click on the insert crease and I can get a hard crease. And I just really like the way that changes the form. So just looking at adding a crease to it. What's the next button? All right, the next button is the torus. Toruses are pretty cool, I have to say. So let's go ahead and make the torus. Let's take off the grid snap here. All right, so let's make this thing tall. Let's make it tall. So let's scale it in the Z direction. So I'm going to pick that ring, move this up. Okay, so we're getting this. Let's isolate this. All right, so I'm going to make it even taller here. So let's just select it and actually just scale the whole thing. Okay, so it's kind of like, you can imagine like a building. Let's get this ring here. And I'm going to scale this in. Okay, and then I'm going to scale the whole thing in this direction, kind of stretch it out a little bit. Let's make sure that we just move it up to the ground plane here. Okay. All right, so let's go back to our bridging, because I think we can make some really cool we can make a really cool object out of this with the bridging. So I'm going to select faces this time. So I'm going to select, let me subdivide this one subdivision. Okay. So now I can select faces. And as long as it's the same number of faces, it will do the bridging. So I'm going to bridge between those two. So let's look at how to do that. So I'm going to click the bridge tool. I'm going to click this one. Shift Control, click that one. Shift Control, click that one. Enter to do my second set. Shift Control, pick this one. Shift Control, pick that one. And then I get the bridging between, I think, which is, let's make this, how many faces do we want? So that's one. So you see it can get smoother and smoother. So I'm going to keep it kind of low poly. And when I do the low poly, the straightness, you know, it all depends on what you're bridging between to get the straightness to work. But you definitely need more sides to get the straightness, and I don't want all those sides. Okay, cool. So you can connect here. So this is kind of like maybe something out of Star Wars. So let's do that one more time. Let's do a couple more down at the bottom here. So I'm going to click on the bridge, pick these four, enter for my second set. which is right across the way. And then create my bridge so I get like these sky bridges going across. Super cool. All right. So those are all the primitives. That concludes all the primitive buttons, which you see, which was this grouping. The next ones are your standard Rhino commands like sweep, sweep one rail, sweep two rail, revolve, loft. Okay, and then we're going to jump into multipipe in a second here. But these standard ones, I don't need to go into those because if you've used Rhino before, you know how to sweep one, you know how to sweep two, you know how to loft. Those are just the same things that you've been doing before. So let's jump into this multipipe, which I think is the possibilities using multipipe are just amazing. I really love the multipipe. So let's look at that. So to do that, I need some two-dimensional geometry. So I'm going to draw a bunch of polygons, actually a bunch of polylines. And when I draw a polyline, I'm going to make sure persistent close is equal to yes. And I'm going to draw some three-sided polylines with the snap on. So I'm going to snap to a central vertex here. I'm going to take my ortho off. And I'm just picking 3 points, and I'm always starting from the same point, making sure that my endpoint snap is on. Okay, just picking that same point, flare it out a little bit. Hopefully I'm getting all the same points. Let's try that again. All right, and then I'm going to make some legs on it, but I'm going to do that in a second here. So I'm going to hide this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to make this three-dimensional. So I'm going to select it all and use the points on command. And I'm going to do a window selection of the middle point, and I'm going to raise those up. So I'm getting this like 3D pyramid. And then I'm gonna do some lifting of some of the points to make this like a folded structure. So I'm gonna select it all, do my points on command, and I'm gonna start to raise. Now I'm always doing a window selection because there's multiple points at all of these kind of apexes here. So I'm making some of this 3D. Okay, so now you see this thing kind of in 3D, and I'm gonna add a little bit more to it with the polyline just to make it a bit more interesting. So maybe from here to here. Let's try that again. Out there, so you get like kind of a branch off of it, and maybe one here, and get another branch off of it. All right, that's pretty cool. Let's see this in 3D. All right, so we're going to use the multipipe. All right, so let's select all of these, and let's click on the multipipe. And you see right off the bat, you're getting something pretty interesting. Let's see what happens if we look at that in rendered mode. Now, cap no, struts 1. So one of the things you can do is you can add the radius to this. So I'm going to add a radius. So what does it look like when it's 3? It gets a little thicker. What does it look like when it's 6? It gets a little thicker. Maybe 3 was a good way to look at it. Cap no. So cap yes or cap no. I imagine that's for open-ended multi-pipes. This is not open-ended. Struts 1. So let's look at that, maybe like 6 struts. So you see it's just kind of adding more like subdivisions to it. I like less subdivisions to it. So we'll go with 3 looked pretty good. What was our original strut? 2? I'm going to try this again. I didn't like the way that was looking. Okay, radius 3. Okay, that's what I want right there. Radius 3, cap no, struts 1. All right, look at that. I mean, you guys could probably, you looking at that and you could probably understand or get a sense of what the real capabilities are with that one. That one is a super, super powerful one. Okay, so that concludes this menu over here. Okay. All right, so let's go through these buttons one by one. The first one is remove SubD or mesh crease. Well, first, I think we need to look at adding the crease first. So that's this button. They should be right next to each other. I don't know why they're not, but this is remove SubD crease, and this is add a SubD crease. All right, so let's create, we'll create another box. Let's get our grid snap on. So we did this crease. So let's subdivide this. Let's add the crease. So we can click on the add soft crease. I like the hard ones. So I right click on it. I double click and select this, press enter, and I get a crease. Okay. So if I press and release the tab key, what does that look like? It looks like that. It looks like a really good object here. Let's isolate this. So what happens if I want to remove the crease? And I guess I don't have to remove the entire crease, but let's just look at that. So I click on remove crease, hold my shift key, double click that, and let's see, it removed the crease. Okay, so if I click it again, there is the crease, there isn't the crease, so that removes it. All right, so that's pretty simple. What if I didn't want to remove the entire ring? So I can click on the remove, and I can say select this edge, select that edge, maybe that edge, and maybe that edge, enter. Okay, so it's a little hard to see, but it is definitely creasing as it gets down toward the bottom, and it's smoother as it gets up toward the top. Let's take away that edge and just see if that looks a little stronger. Yeah, so now we can see the differences. We have some crease fading to a smooth. So that's adding a crease and removing a crease. So that's the first button and the fourth button. Okay, second button is what? What is the second button? Second button is expand edges. Okay, so let's just go back to our plane when we made a plane. Create a SubD plane. Okay, press and release the tab key. All right, so expanding the edges of that. So let's click on that, expand edges. Just better to go into shaded mode to kind of see that a little bit better. And it expands those out. It has offset medium, style double. All right, so you get another edge. You know, basically that's what it's doing, is it's giving you another edge. Let's do it again. Let's pick this edge this time. Got to use shift control still, enter. It gives you another edge. So if I select that, I can pull this out. Let's go in the right direction here. So you can start to create something a little bit more complex. All right, so then I can select some of these faces and I can start to manipulate. You can start to do some really funky things here. You got to just keep in mind pressing and releasing the tab key to see how your mesh looks. Get like a triangular mesh there, but you see you can do some more like maybe like kind of like flowing roof geometry or something like that. Okay, so that's just kind of some 2D. All right, next. All right, next is bevel. Bevel is a little tricky with SubD. I'll have to say that. So let's click on the bevel and let's do this edge here. So I'm going to hold shift and control, and then you can kind of see what's happening with the beveling. Now, I'm not a super big fan of the beveling here, so then we can kind of see that. Let's go to our mesh mode. So it always creates these 3 different planes, you know, to make to make a bevel. Okay, so that's bevel. We did the add soft crease, hard crease. We haven't done the insert edge loop or insert edge ring, which I think is really helpful when you want some more edges to your shape. So let's do this with a box. Let's pull this up. Shift control this. Stretch it up. Okay, so now you see that there's this area. There's this area where there is no edges here. It's really long. But what happens if I want to add an edge here, but I don't want to add edges everywhere else? Like if I do this, I get more edges everywhere else. I'm looking for just having this edge right here. So what I can do is I can click on that tool, insert sub edge loop. So I'm going to click insert sub edge loop, and then I have to select the edge from loop. So I have to actually pick this one. Essentially it is, it is a copy, even though it's saying insert edge loop. It is a copy. Okay, so let's go ahead and click that button, and then we can move those down. So I'm getting a copy of those down. My snaps get in the way. The snaps get in the way a lot, so maybe disabling the snaps is helpful. So now I have that edge created, and I can do things with that edge, right? All right, let's move on to the next one. So insert a point is just that. It inserts a point along, let's say, an edge here, and then if I enter, I get a point there, just a little point there, and I can try to select that. So I'll go to the vertices here, and I'll pick that, and I get just a little point there. Okay, so if you want to add points, a point or points, you can do that. What does that look like when I press the tab key? So yeah, that creates something a little bit funky there. Okay, so let's make two planes. Let's make another one. Let's make sure that their edges meet. Okay, and let's append them. Okay, so I'm going to click append faces to sub D. Pick this one, and it joins them together. So that's pretty cool. All right, next one. Let's look at merge coplanar faces. So we'll make a plane again. And then merging the coplanar faces, we'll take these 1, 2, 3, 4 and merge it into one. So let's take a look at that. So let's just click on it, select it, it merges it into one. Okay, next is the inset sub D edges. I think that one is a really cool one. So let's click on that. Let's pick these faces here. Enter. And then it insets them, and you can see you can do it by distance, insert distance, or distance base point. So that's really cool. Let's pick a point. Let's take off the grid snap. Just pick a point. So then I can do that kind of free forming that in, and then there's a lot of possibilities with that. So I think that's really cool. Just press and release the tab key. Everything looks good here. All right, next we are getting through these stitch. So let's make a hole. Let's delete that hole there, and let's look at stitching that. All right, so let's stitch it together. Now this tool isn't like a fill in the mesh or fill in the hole. It's a little bit different. So I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to click my first set. So I'm going to pick these top two edges, and then I'm done, and then I'm going to click my second set, and then I'm going to press enter, and that stitches between those, and then I can pick the location of the stitch. So it's a little bit different. It's not really a fill in. It's not a fill in, and we'll have to look at a fill in. It's got to be one of these buttons. How does that look in? So you get some funky vertices here that you got to keep an eye on, that you would have to fix. These thin ones going up to these edges, but smoothed out, it looks pretty good. So just kind of keeping an eye on both of those. Okay, so that was stitch. Next one is bridge. We've done a whole lot of bridging. The next one is the subdivide. We've done that. All right, let's look at this next one, spin SubD edge. This one is kind of interesting. I haven't really figured out a great use for it, but if I click this one, it spins that edge. If I click that one, it spins that edge. So you get some triangular, I guess. That's one good thing, some triangular faces with that. Or I should say some triangular edges, which can be, I think, helpful. Okay, the next one is slide, mesh, or SubD edges or vertices. Okay, so that's just picking them. Let's pick this one too. Enter, and then we can slide these. This one is a little funky. Let's try it on maybe just one edge and see what happens. Slide. Okay, so now I'm getting some. Let's try it on a more uniform one. Okay, so you can see, yeah, it's just kind of deforming them. So that's sliding them. All right, could see that. Probably could be helpful. Okay, pack SubD faces and set SubD face per color. Okay, so this is more for just checking geometry before you convert it to NURBS. Okay, so let's click on set SubD per face color by face packs. Let's select this one. Okay, so you see it gives me those colors, and it's adding the colors to each, like, I guess you could say, like, each side. You're getting a color for each side. Okay, and this is for packing the SubD faces. This is when you're converting to NURBS geometry. So this can be really helpful. So unpack it just gets rid of the color, and I can right click on it. Okay, and that kind of gets that it gets it back to normal. Not kind of. All right, let's go. We're almost through all of these. Okay, so we have a merge faces. Let's try that one. Use my shift and control. Enter. Merge those faces. That's pretty cool. Okay, so that one's pretty simple. Delete faces. Enter. Get something really interesting there. And reflect, we've done that. Radiate SubD, that seems really interesting. Pick a center point. Okay, so it's like a kind of like a polar array. Next, fill SubD hole. So there's the hole. So let's make a hole. Okay, there's our hole, and then let's use the fill SubD hole. Select SubD mesh or boundary edges. I'm gonna double click on that. Enter. Enter. That gives me a hole, and there were some options, or that fills in the hole, and there were definitely some options. So the options are something that you guys want to definitely look a little bit deeper into. Trying to pick a vertex here. Just kind of move that out. How's it look? It looks okay. Looks okay. Okay, next. Extrude SubD, super helpful. Extrude SubD, so I can select a face. Let me get off my filter. I can select a face, and then I can extrude it. Okay, and this one real tricky. Let's take the grid snap off. a little bit tricky, like in how it's extruding. So again, it's the base UVN and the WCS, the world coordinate, and the normal that you want to look at when you're doing some extrusions. Look at that. Too funny. All right. Next, extrude offset sub D. So offset sub D can be really helpful for turning a shell into a solid. So let's take a look at that. Let's delete this bottom here. Okay, so now we're seeing into this shape, and let's use the offset. So I can flip it in or out. I'm going to go in, distance of 2, solid, yes, both sides, no, delete input, yes, flip all. So we'll see that. It creates a nice, solid piece of geometry that you can, 3D print and then make it hollow. So it creates a hollow geometry, which is nice and helpful. Okay, let's look at the next one, quad remesh. This is a really great tool for turning sub-Ds into mesh. So let's copy this. And let's use that tool. Lots of options there, tons of options in there, but let's just look at the default. Okay, we'll delete the original. Okay, now this is a mesh. If I select it and I type in what, that is a mesh. And that's a nice clean mesh, which I really like. If I want to 3D print that, that's a clean mesh. Okay, next one is repair sub-D. If something was wrong with a sub-D, you could repair it. No flaws detected. Okay, so if something was bad, you could repair it. The next one is convert object to NURBS. Okay, yeah, we want to be able to do that. So let's convert this object to NURBS. Let's copy this object. And let's convert it to NURBS. Okay, do I have both here? Okay, so sub-D I'm going to delete. All right, so we have a poly surface. If I type in what, that is a valid poly surface. Okay, it's open because the bottom is hollow on that. Okay, next one is toggle. That's just the tab, the tab key. Okay, these aren't toggling because that's a mesh and that's a NURBS. That one is so funky. Okay, that one in the middle is super funky. All right, toggle sub-D display. Next one is select sub-D objects. That'll select all of them. If you have non-sub-D and sub-D, those all go to sub-D. So these are all just selection filters here. So select sub-D objects, select edge loop, select edge ring, select sub-D edges. So if I only want to, so what this does is you don't have to use shift and control. So if I pick this and then I pick the edges, it picks only the edges. Select by brushing. Okay, that's an interesting one. Named selections, select faces by boundary, select filter edges, select filter faces. I use the vertices one a lot because it's hard to select vertices sometimes. So I like that one. And then you just got to remember to turn these off when you're done. All right, let's look at what we have here. Look at all this amazing, wonderful stuff here. Let's look at this in our rendered mode. Last but not least, okay, what I want to look at is what's called the zebra. Okay, zebra. And then I'm going to select an object for the stripe analysis. This needs to be shaded. Okay, this checks continuity, and you can see the continuity in these objects. Let's add objects. Okay, and you can see the continuity. That's what's so great about sub-D, is the continuity. All right, that's all things SubD. Remember, this is to open up your minds to the possibility of making anything that you can think of, really, using SubD, and it just changes the game. It changes the way we look at modeling architectural forms. No more 2D to 3D. This is a real sculptural way to make really complex and clean geometry. All right, that's SubD. I will see you on the next one.